This is Zenith at its best, at least in my opinion. Not when it's trying to follow a trend or do a style that other brands excel at, but rather when it leans into its chronograph history with the Primero and give us something that truly feels different from every other chronograph out there. And while it's not entirely a new watch since this Zenith Chronomaster Revival Shadow came out in 2020, side note, I'm glad we stopped calling it the A384 Revival Shadow because that was a mouthful. 4 years later today in 2024, and we now have a matching microblasted titanium ladder bracelet, which just completes the overall look of this watch. Now, I covered this exact watch about 4 years ago, and truthfully always felt like I still had more to say, and it's one of those watches that I love showing people in my store Carrot & Co. because of how much it stands out compared to other chronographs. And I got to test drive this watch for a few days, so let's first start with the new bracelet. So the watch has the same 37mm case, 12.7mm thickness, and lug-to-lug of 46.7mm. The original ladder bracelet was made from a well-known bracelet manufacturer named Gay Freres. It's called a ladder bracelet because as seen, there are large gaps in the center links, as if these are steps up a ladder. Very clear where the nickname comes from. To keep it brief, Gay Freres was known as the wristwatch bracelet manufacturer who produced bracelets for Rolex, Patek Philippe, Vacheron Constantin, Audemars Piguet, and obviously Zenith. And in 1998, Rolex purchased Gay Freres to integrate their bracelet making expertise into their manufacture. But today, Zenith recreated this iconic Gay Freres ladder bracelet in matching microblasted titanium. The bracelet starts at 19mm at the case with a connecting link that seamlessly continues that slope from the A384 case and tapers at the clasp around 17.5mm. That slight taper visually looks nice and makes the bracelet not feel chunky. Something unique about this bracelet is how breathable it is. I mean, there's literally large gaps in between the links so you can get some good airflows on those hot days. And pair that with the lightweight titanium, and this was very comfortable to wear for hours on end. The links are connected with screw pins and are very easy to adjust. The bracelet has no flare at the end links and drapes nicely down the wrist. I really like how the clasp is done. It features a double lock system with a top latch and a fold over clasp. It also has 5 holes of manual micro adjustment. And even though an on the fly adjustment is always my preference, while I had it on my wrist for several days, I did need to readjust the micro adjustment even on those 90-degree days in New York. Now, one of my pet peeves on bracelet clasp is when the clasp length or thickness exceeds the actual watch case itself, which can create a very thick and uncomfortable wearing experience. And I'm happy to say that none of those things happen here on the Zenith. To open the clasp, you need to first unlatch this part and then open the fold over clasp. And while you would open the top part with your fingernail, I recommend using your finger underneath the clasp to open the fold over clasp, so that way you don't have to put too much effort. Trust me, you'll have a much better time with this and for any clasp for that matter. Now, the only thing I can see bothering people is the lack of on-the-fly micro adjustment, because aside from that, the ladder bracelet is so different that you'd only choose this option if that was the style you were going for. Now, the Revival Shadow has a 37mm tunnel case, and now with the bracelet, it can wear a little larger than if it was on the original Cordura strap. And although the dial itself is black, the case and bracelet appear more charcoal gray, which will all lend to its monochromatic look. The Revival Shadow houses the Primero caliber 4061, which has a 50-hour power reserve, high beat rate of 5 Hz, and is time only with no date window. I love that it has no date window, and it's one of Zenith's few watches in their modern lineup to not have a date. It's a column wheel chronograph, and I encourage you to try the chronograph pushers on an Primero because it's very different from something like an Omega Speedmasters. The pushers react very fast and give good tactile feedback when activating. This movement also differs from the Primero used in the Chronomaster Original or Sport because it can count up to 12 hours instead of 1/10 of a second, counting a total of 60 minutes. I love using chronographs in general. Even though it may not be as useful as a date or GMT function, I use mine for commuting, cooking, watching movies, flying in a plane, or all 4 at once. Just kidding. And this movement is non-hacking, meaning if you pull the crown, the seconds hand will continue running. That doesn't bother me because the seconds hand is so small, I don't try to synchronize the watch anyways. The dial features 9 applied indices filled with lume, leaving gaps at 3, 6, and 9 where the sub-dials need space to display the info. Starting at 9 o'clock, you have the running seconds for the hours and minutes. At 3 o'clock counts up to 30 minutes for the chronograph, and down at 6 o'clock counts up to 12 hours on the chronograph. So let's say to count a 2-hour movie, the 30-minute counter will go around 4 times, and you'll see the 12-hour counter point to the second line for 2 hours. Just an example why I love chronographs. The dial has good amount of lume on the hands, chronograph second and hour markers. There's also no minute markings, which I've seen some people complain about, but I don't find it an issue because it's pretty easy to know what minute it's on, and there's already enough going on with the dial. At the outer edge of the dial features the tachometer scale in the same color, and centered is the Zenith star logo with 4 lines of text. The only thing that feels cramped is those 4 lines of text on the dial. I think it could have done better with just Zenith and El Primero, but oh well. Finally, it has 5-bar water resistance, which is basically good enough for hand washing, but I don't recommend submerging this watch in water. Because of its strong design, this Zenith feels like it's meant to stand out on the wrist. It doesn't look as good as when I wore it with a dress shirt cuff, but rather short sleeves and let the watch just stand out as it's meant to in a casual, sporty attire. This is definitely not a watch for everyone, but for someone who loves chronograph and really wants something with cool history and is different. I mean, just the ladder bracelet itself makes it feel vintage, and then you microblast it titanium and it feels modern. And the last thing I'll mention is scratches. So I've only borrowed this for a few days. It wasn't really long enough for me to develop any scratches on the watch, but I did find this user on Reddit who has this watch with some real life experiences, so you can check that out. By the way, I love the white rubber strap that you paired. Let me know your thoughts on the new bracelet, and if you want to purchase or check it out, my store Carrot & Co is an authorized dealer for Zenith located in New York. If you want to see some other watch videos, you can check out the playlist here. It's been a minute, and thanks for watching.